I do think just the way I feel with my performers and with my audience that I'm always in this sort of relationship, which is about collaboration. And sometimes I'm able to really articulate what I want. Sometimes the music articulates something else, but it really works. And sometimes, I miss, but I do think I always have a sense of abundance. Like, I don't know, I always feel like there are tons of melodies out there, whatever. So this piece has 5 melodies. Maybe it has 6, it doesn't really matter. That idea, the author Annie Dillard really expresses it, don't ever hold anything back. Just give what you have at that moment. And there's always a sense of, there's going to be more. There will be more opportunities.
Welcome to Ambient Discourses, conversations with musicians and composers who create musical experiences and sonic landscapes. My guest is a repeat offender.
Yay!
She is the composer, Tina Davidson, and we had a great conversation last time about her previous release and her memoir, and she has a brand new album out, and I'm excited to share some snippets of it with you in the video. It's in the interview itself, but Tina, welcome back.
I'm so glad to be with you again. Wonderful.
I just really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation last time because to me you are an absolute gem of a human being. You're authentic, and your compositions, they're deeply rooted in our humanity and our shared collective experiences and our touch with the divinity, the totality of everything. And it's why I will have this conversation over and over and over. So
wonderful.
Welcome back to the program.
Just delighted to be with you again. Yes.
So the brand new album is Barefoot, and it features the Jasper String Quartet and pianist Natalie Zhu. I'm not sure how she
Zhu, I think.
Zhu,
I don't know exactly. Zhu, I think,
I'm aware there's like 3 different dialectic pronunciations of ZHU, but it was so exquisite, and it passes through numerous years and times in your life, covering different emotions, and I'm just really excited to just get a little bit deeper dive on this and deeper understanding of what sort of things were going on into the things that were fueling some of these compositions. So well, let's just dive right in, shall we? Yay! Oh, so how did you hook up with the Jasper String Quartet and Natalie?
I actually hooked up with Natalie first, and Leap, which was the most recent piece on the album, it's the last one, was commissioned for her festival, and she premiered it. And then we just had this wonderful relationship, and Jasper Quartet lives in the Philadelphia area, so and she's always wanted to work with the Jasper, and so we just said, hey, let's talk. And so they decided to do this with us. There is only one piece on the album that is for piano and string quartet. The rest are either 3 strings or 2 strings, or sometimes just there's one piece with 1 strings. And these are more of my more recent works. So I would say the last, let's see, so 2011 is, so recent-ish, so, and I think one of the things that I had noticed is in the last 10 or 15 years is that my thinking about music had become really kind of personal. Like I was sort of coming home to myself, coming home to my to more smaller things rather than, big dramatic things that were not dramatic, but connected outside of me. These were much more personal. I love how my titles of pieces have gone from Delight of Angels, It Is My Heart Singing, to just one word. And I think that's really interesting. And again, I think it is sort of the more personal relationship that I'm having with what I'm saying. It's sort of like it's not that I'm writing it just for myself, but there is a much more sort of like, this is home. I'm home, and I can really compose and write about home. Yeah.
Right. And it seems also more introspective than it is expressive, and the expressiveness comes obviously from the notation and the instruments and the performers putting themselves into the pieces. But one of the things I loved about it is just that it was so ornate, and it was just so much movement, and
yes.
I'm a barefoot walker. I love walking barefoot. And so merging those two things, like thinking about walking through my garden or walking through the backyard, and the small things that bring me delight, and listening to this music in juxtaposition with those two things together, it does feel more intimate. It feels more quaint is the wrong word, but it hones in on it's cozy and
quiet
and very personal.
Yeah. Yes. So the piece Barefoot I wrote in the middle of, I think I was at the McDowell Colony, and I was in this studio that was stuck in the woods, and they actually had me sleeping somewhere else, but I really wanted to sleep out in my studio. I just wanted to be out there. And I was just sort of dreaming of walking around barefoot, and feeling the earth with my feet. And with most of my music, when I usually get a title before I've started the piece, and it's something personal for me. And a lot of times I know what it is, but I don't, it's sort of this double relationship. So and usually when I'm composing, I'll just hold that word in my head. It's not like I'm really trying to describe it. It's sort of like part of the process. And so that idea of being barefoot and being in my garden and having the dirt under my feet, sort of, and under my toes. And then I was really thinking of how Moses meets God in the burning bush out on Mount Sinai. And the first thing he has to do is take off his shoes. So that kind of sense of being connected to the earth, or our resource, or, what we live in and what we believe in, being really physically connected, skin to earth, was very much on my mind when I was writing this piece. But as you notice, I wouldn't say that there is a restlessness about my music, but it's always moving.
Yeah.
There's always this kind of undercurrent. And I think that's actually the way I feel my body, and I feel my physical relationship with the world, is there's always like a little something is bubbling up. And I'm super interested in physical energy. Like, what would happen if you're running and you're running and you're running and you're running and you're running, and then you're exhausted? What happens to that forward motion energy? Can it, if you fall down, will it kind of go up like this? Oh, yeah. So I'm really interested in that. I think when you're a composer, my experience of being a composer, is there's always something a little scientific that I'm working on. I like a problem I'm trying to solve. Not in any of these pieces, but recently I've been really interested in chords, and could you slide them down like if they were liquid? If this were kind of a chord and you could kind of mush it and slide it, and rather than moving from chord to chord or note to note, you could almost kind of squeeze it into the direction that it's going in. Yeah. And I know that's kind of more of an intellectual interest, but I do think when you're doing any kind of art form, there's so many different points that you're coming from. Emotional, maybe melodic, maybe just notes. And then there's this little problem that I'm trying to solve. I'm just like I wonder how I could do that. And, one piece it works, and then the next piece, I'm trying to push it a little further. Yeah. So I think it's a kind of a whole body approach when you're doing an art form. It's lots of things coming together. At least that's my impression.
Well, yeah, I've been playing around with, not playing around with, energy has been very much of a focus for me, like trying to understand the energy that's within us and how it works, and how, I know that various traditions have their own terminologies and their own understanding, whether it's some of the East Indian traditions of Kundalini and understanding of this this energy, the source of life, the source of it all within us, and how that interacts with our normal actions, running, walking, or being.
Yes.
And I'm fascinated with it because I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes it happens quite often, unfortunately. In the middle of the night, I will feel these surges of energy, and the only thing I can do that will satiate it is to get up and create and do something with it.
Oh, wow.
As opposed
I'm usually asleep. Actually, that's not true. My dreams will haunt me. And there are times where I've had to wake up in the middle of the night and say, hey, music, you belong in the studio. I'm sleeping. Give me a break here. Well, I do. The truth is I think your mind is always solving problems. It's always thinking, or maybe as it stores information, a problem is revealed. You're looking at it slower, perhaps, because your brain is storing information at night. And I think sometimes if you've been very invested during the day, or maybe even not had the time to do that during the day, that's so. But your experience is that you have to get up and do something, right?
Yeah, I've tried telling my body, all right, it's sleep time, and it's like, no, anarchy, no. Let's go.
Right, yeah, right. Let's go. Yeah.
So, next in line with your, like, going sequentially, so you have Barefoot, and you're talking about you have this imagery of the earth, and then you have Tremble, which was the next sequential one that you wrote and composed in 2013. That's for violin, cello, and piano.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about what kind of fueled that composition for you.
Well, I was thinking of how the word tremble is so many things. You tremble in excitement. You tremble in love. You tremble in fear. It is something that your body does in response to an emotion, whether it's fear or happiness or excitement or, and I was also musically thinking of, just what happens if the note were to tremble, if you could add, vibrato is a kind of a trembling. Yeah. And on the violin, on the string instrument, what's wonderful about that is instead of using a fixed point on your finger, you're actually rotating the flesh on your finger so you get a wider patch of your finger, but it's moving. And that actually causes the string to vibrate in a more deep and resonant kind of way. So I was thinking a lot about that kind of trembling. I think that opens with, I love to mute the piano. I love to do, to distort the sound of the piano a little bit. Mm-hmm. I am a pianist, and I remember playing a lot of Henry Cowell, who I always feel was such an amazing inventor of sound. He is many times given the credit of creating clusters where you play all the notes within a given space. He did a lot of clusters with his hands and also with his arms. So he would roll on the piano. So I always, and he, he's American, sort of for me, the movement of coming to contemporary music, not through a Western lens, but through an American lens, which would be Henry Cowell, it would be William Schumann, it would be Carl Ruggles, Charles Ives, more of those sort of craggy individualists. So I love changing the sound of the piano. I love all the different sounds that the piano makes. And so that starts with the pianist actually muting the strings as they're playing in the beginning of that piece. And I think in those pieces, that piece, I was also much more interested in what if you take a chord, so any 3 or 4 notes, and instead of playing it once, you just played it again and again and again and again. What would happen to that sound? Would you be able to dig into the sound deeper? Yeah. Or would something come out of that? So, certainly beating chords is not anything new, but it's been very sort of like, could I get closer into the sound by beating it? I'm always wanting to pry into the sound, get to sort of the kernel of a note. To me, a note has got this shell, and sometimes you can get into it. I know it sounds kind of.
No, it's not. I'm with you there. There's a few composers and pianists from Europe that I follow, Niels Fromm and Hanya Rani, and a lot of their music does have some of that like single note or chord note like repetition to the point where you start to generate resonance within itself. Yes. And to start to explore its own, not the rhythm itself, but the effect of the repetition of that rhythm and the resonance. I think
the depth of sound. There is a wonderful apocryphal story about Carl Ruggles, and somebody was visiting him, and he was going to knock at the door, but Ruggles was at the piano, and he's playing this one chord again and again and again and again. And after a long time, this friend interrupted him, and he said, "What are you doing? Why are you playing this chord again and again?" And Ruggles supposedly said, "I'm giving it the test of time."
Let's check out a track from the brand new album from Tina Davidson, Barefoot. This is entitled Tremble, composed for violin, cello, piano, performed by Natalie Zhu on the piano and the Jasper String Quartet.
I think as a composer, like an artist, you're very, very interested in your medium, whatever your medium is. And you're always exploring it and digging into it and pushing it around and wondering about it. So that's certainly part of my work as a composer. And again, wondering, I think, is a great way of thinking about it. Sort of like I hold these titles in my head and wonder. I just, it's not like I know what this means. It's sort of like, that I wonder, So that sort of question, that openness to what's going on rather than, I know what this is.
Yeah, it's a curiosity and a playfulness.
Yes.
And just exploration and
Mm-hmm.
without without coming to a conclusion before the adventure is even done.
And also sometimes you have to give in to the music. Sometimes I'm in control and I'm really in control of the notes. And then other times I am so not in control. Like I just finished a piece for Sarah Cahill for piano. I don't know what happened at the end. It's actually really beautiful. We were having a Zoom rehearsal. She's going to premiere it in August. And I said, I don't know what happened there. I wasn't really in control, but I really like it.
That's something else when the music kind of asserts itself and becomes sort of sentient, and it develops its own personality and it's its own energy, and it's quite the ride when you end up in that kind of flow state, and
yes. And I think I do think as an artist, there is always this line that you're between what is your sort of prime directive and then what is collaboration. Even I always feel like I'm kind of collaborating with the notes.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, sometimes I'm in charge of them, and sometimes I say, no, don't do that. Hey, come back. And sometimes they say, yeah, not going to do, I'm staying here. But I do think just the way I feel with my performers and with my audience, that I'm always in this sort of relationship, which is about collaboration. And sometimes I'm able to really articulate what I want. Sometimes the music articulates something else, but it really works. And sometimes, I miss, but I do think I always have a sense of abundance. Like, I don't know, I always feel like there are tons of melodies out there, whatever. So this piece has 5 melodies. Maybe it has 6, it doesn't really matter. That idea, the author Annie Dillard really expresses it, don't ever hold anything back. Just give what you have at that moment. And there's always a sense of there's going to be more. There will be more opportunities.
That resonates with me so much. I mean, that is, I find that a lot in my, I'm more of an improv composer where I'm just, I don't ever write anything down. I'm just constantly looking for the end and just constantly riding whatever wave comes. And there is a collaboration between, it's really hard to describe, but you're right in that it's you kind of just ride along with the notes themselves, or the melody, or the overall feeling, and it's a dance. It's very
that's
much
a great way.
You're dancing with the melody, and sometimes you assert yourself, sometimes you allow it to ride, and sometimes you end up like, whoa, I didn't mean to do that, but that's out there now, and
okay.
But it's not but it's not unlike life. I was thinking about that the other day, where life is improv. It's constant improv, and you've got to think on your toes and learn to adapt and roll with all the mistakes, roll with all the things that don't go right, and be okay with that.
And to trust your resources, trust your brain. I mean, the brain is such a magnificent machine. I am always reminded when I'm crossing the street, the brain is always making calculations. There's a car coming. How fast is it coming? Do you need to speed up? It's not like I'm thinking about this. The brain just says, okay, let's move. And I think trusting your experiences, trusting that instead of scarcity, there's abundance. that really is a mindset. It's you can go one way or the other, and I tend to side with abundance.
Yeah, that's wise, because it really is. There really is no end to it all. I think of all the things that I've held on to with nostalgia, and hold on to the things I've created, or whether with such preciousness, but it's like that. It's just a photograph, metaphorically speaking, of just a moment, and there's more moments to be had right now. And
I think there are times when we panic, and I just have to get back to, I'm not in charge of everything. I'm not in control of everything. I can do this part. And panic really wastes energy, wastes what we have right now, which is important, which brings us to Weepan. Let me show you. So actually, the cover is two of my drawings. This is a watercolor. And I have the wonderful graphic designer that I have, and this is a charcoal drawing, and he put them together.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I think Weepan is the next sort of chronologically, and it is for string quartet and piano. And I was at a really very hard place in my life. I had just left my husband, my second marriage, and I just wanted to write. I was going to write something else, and I just couldn't. I was really amazed. I was going to write a whole other piece, and I just couldn't do it. So then I decided I would write this piece. And Weepan is an old, I think it's Anglo-Saxon for weeping. And I think this piece, again, I really love it. I put 3-inch drywall screws in the piano. And drywall screws are very thin. They got a little pointy end, and they have a pretty big top. So you can actually screw them into the strings without actually hurting them.
Wow.
So they don't, when you push something between the strings of the piano, they kind of bulge. But this, you just actually screw them. And it gives this sort of, and then you can tune them if you pull them closer to the hammer or farther away to the dampers, They have different sounds. And the strings in this piece are doing an awful lot of glissandoing. They're being, it's almost like the notes have weights attached to them, and they keep on being pulled down. There is this sense of gravity. I'm really interested in gravity, and could you attach like weights on these notes, and they're struggling to go up, but they're being pulled down. So I find this piece more emotional for me, when I listen to it, I'm sort of brought back to the time when it was a very hard time for me. And this, I think, having a full string quartet, so 2 violins, viola, and cello, I love writing for strings. So,
well, and it just certainly opens up the possibilities for expressiveness and interplay. And
one of the things I do in this is I will double a melody. So let's say it's a cello playing with a viola, and I will ask the viola to try to be out of tune with the cello.
Oh.
So that is a very cool sound. Not super out of tune.
Yeah.
Just, here's the cello, and it's like going up and down like this, just like, so there is kind of a widening of the sound. And
Yeah.
I think my performers are really happy when I tell them to play out of tune. They go, whoa, yay.
That is so flippin' creative. I love that, and it's just so inventive. Oh my gosh, Tina, you are just a fountain of creativity and inventiveness. I just want to.
You got to try it. You got to try it. It's a wonderful, and it's not easy for the performers. They're so geared in playing in tune that it's hard for them. They really have to work at it.
I believe it.
Yeah, a lot of times,
just bring a sixth grader into the mix.
Right?
No effort.
That's true. Well, it's one thing to be in tune with vibrato. Now, a sixth grader wouldn't have any vibrato, so the whole sound is very thin.
Yeah,
it's and almost tinny.
Yep.
And that's a whole different kind of sound.
Right.
That I like that too. But, there have been times, particularly, we'll talk about Leap in order, but when we were rehearsing that for its premiere, I write a lot of notes. I'm always like going, wow, there are a lot of notes in this piece. And finally we were rehearsing it, and I think they were feeling a little stressed. And I said, I just want you to throw away the notes. Don't worry about the notes. If you get them wrong, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It really doesn't matter. Just get the feeling. Get the feeling. Don't worry about the notes. Nobody's going to say, oh, excuse me, I heard,
Right.
And that actually made them feel really comfortable. And I think in olden days, so in Rubinstein and, even Liszt, they were just filled with mistakes. They didn't really care that much. It wasn't a society of perfection, like how perfect can we play this? It was really more about the emotions and these, a note here or there, it's kind of not a big deal.
That is so refreshing to hear, because I think there is maybe a misunderstanding or an impression about the whole classical music genre, that it's all baked in perfection and it's all about precision, but you're suggesting that there's a lot of room for, it's not important about having the notes being perfect and the perfect pitch and allowing the emotion to be just as important as the notation and the technique.
I think so. I think, particularly if it's a live performance, it's all about the hall and who you're sitting next to and watching this sport. It is kind of a sport. How are they playing? But it's also looking at how the performers are relating to each other, how they smile at each other, how they get each other, I don't even think you could notice all the notes, because it involves so many senses. Your eyes, your ears, you're next to people, you're listening, you've got this whole big array of sounds. Somebody next to you is moving, or, so I think, just don't worry about it. Just play. just go with it. Yeah. And hopefully there's another opportunity. You can do it differently next time or whatever. And I think, especially when you're recording things, there is a sense of wanting things to be perfect, because somebody could listen to it really slowly and could hear it. So I'm going to digress for a moment. I'm reading my memoir. I'm making an audiobook of it. And it's really interesting performing your own writing. There are times when I'm going, how come there's so many W's all in a row? Like, what was this author? I'm like, on what? I certainly have a very newfound amazement at actors who are really able to enunciate and actually put the consonants and the S's on the end of the sentences. I am also really interested. There are times where I'll use a word that I haven't written, like I'll change it a little bit. Like I'll say the instead of this, and it just makes me wonder if it's that important. What is important when you're, is the motion where you're going important, or is it that you're stopping and watching everything in slow frame? And my feeling is, particularly with music, is it's the journey. You're going past, you just keep on moving, and it's that you're arriving and departing that's important, not the tree that you saw or the house that you saw. I mean, every once in a while you'll see something beautiful and hold that in your memory, and that will become part of the journey. But it's not necessarily the most important thing.
Right. That makes me think a lot when I write. I'm a verbose writer. I'm terrible. Like if you ask me to email you, it'll probably vary. but I think about what you're saying, and I think it gives really good guidance for not just writing or music, but lots of things. We get so worried about the details, worried about choosing the right word, when even you choose that right word, but even someone else in their own experience, they're going to read that word differently, not phonetically or anything like that, but probably have their own meaning attached to the things that we say, and it's going to come across as completely different. I mean, hello, that's marriage.
Well, and that just reminds me that you should never have an emotional conversation in email, because there isn't that ability to be sensing what the other person is saying and maybe changing what you say it. Like, oh, they're really upset about this. I can modify this a little bit and we can come back to it later. But in an email, you're just pounding those. And that, I think, is the difference between performance and sometimes recording. That a performance is very conversational. It has a flow. It has a real sense of physically being interactive in that particular environment. I just went up to Mount Gretna and heard the Ulysses Quartet play, and they played an amazing Joan Towers piece, but it was very hot on stage. And it was just, the whole idea is, how is heat going to affect this performance, which is very real time.
Yeah,
really real time, which is, that's very environmental. So how is that going to affect the performance, and, that in an interesting way? So they played just beautifully. So
I've got one more track that I would like to check out. This is the title track to Tina Davidson's brand new album, Barefoot. It's composed for violin, cello, viola, and piano, performed by Natalie Zhu on the piano and the Jasper String Quartet, here on Ambient Discourses.
I am one who totally subscribes to the ambience of wherever you are and wherever you're playing is just as much of a contributing member to the ensemble. The space that you're in, the lighting, the
how the audience is reacting. Yes. Yeah. No, it's wonderful. Yeah. Another good reason to forget the note and just play to the room. Just play. Just say it. So yeah. So the next piece is Hush, and I had actually written a couple of pieces. I have another piece called Hum, and Hush. Hum, which is not on this album, it's on another album. There used to be, and still people hum. You're walking, you hear somebody humming, but we are now sort of more in a society where music comes to us. We don't make it. We are listening to things. We're singing along with things, but we're just not there singing. And Hush, I was thinking, how do you comfort someone? You go, hush, hush, a child or even, if you have an animal and they're excited, you stroke them, you're sort of calming them down. And I was thinking about that relationship between parent and child, and just willing to hold them and take their discomfort in and, allow them to quiet. So that's kind of what was guiding me for that piece. And it's a solo violin, it's a violin and piano piece.
It was really gorgeous. Loved it.
Yeah. Just very kind of quiet and lush, although it does get energetic, because sometimes you're hushing them, but there is all this environmental sound that because you're so hushed and quieted, you can hear better. And just to say the word, it's so interesting how certain words really feel like they were created around the act of what they're trying to do.
Yes.
Yeah, so I love the word. Yeah, hush.
So your last piece, which is broken up into two movements, you've got Leap, which is written violin, cello, viola, and piano.
Right. And that was, of course, during the pandemic.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Yes.
Yeah. So the first movement is called Uncertain Ground. And certainly, the whole idea of leaping, your heart leaps in love. I mean, there are all these word references to leaping. But a leap of faith is something where you are willing to move forward not knowing what is under your feet. So you are going to believe that it's the right choice. And perhaps it isn't. A leap of faith is not always successful.
Right, yeah.
But it is something. But I was thinking of, we were pushed into the pandemic. It certainly was very uncertain. So this was 21. So we'd already been in, when I started writing it, we'd already been in it for about a year. But the second movement is Sudden Passage. I think that sense that there, even in the throes of this uncertainty, there have been so many gifts that we received. I certainly think that families got in touch with their children more. Things ground to a stop and we found ourselves resourceful. I was on Zoom once a week with my daughter and her family playing games for a couple hours, so we, Zoom now is just, everybody does it. And it's interesting that through this very difficult time, there was this passageway as well. and I don't usually write in two movements. I tend to write in one movement, I guess, because that's kind of the way I feel my life. I don't feel like it's separated. Certainly form, when you think about form in music, in classical music, it's the sonata form where there's a fast movement, a slow movement, and a last final. And sometimes there are four movements, but usually that is considered very classically, the structure of a piece. But I've always thought that there are lots of different structures, but we just get stuck in one pattern. And for me, the one movement structure has felt much more comfortable with my life. I don't really separate myself into, I was a kid and then I was an adult and then I'm an old person. I don't really bifurcate myself like that. I really always feel like I'm on a journey. And there are different places that I arrive at. Sometimes I stay there, and sometimes I move on. So a one movement, which has got lots of slow and fast, it's not necessarily predictable in that sense. So this is slightly different for me to have two movements instead of one, but that worked out.
I like that the ideas that you're playing around with, and the idea of movement and the and not just the uncertainty of it, but the idea that this is the only way through is the being present, and you embrace everything that comes with it. Everything, even if it's unpleasant, it's still a part of the experience, and it's still a part of helps shape part of who we are, whether it's informing our sensitivity towards other things, or maybe it does strengthen our aversions to certain things or reinforces certain ideas. And God, the pandemic was that. I mean, it was just this non-stop, got to find our way through. And for me, one thing that really resonated was this idea that we're going so fast through our culture and through our lives, respective lives, that we're losing sight of community, losing sight of our connectivity to each other. And in a weird way, the pandemic did that in like, well, now you're isolated. Now what you gonna do?
Well, I think and the human cost to the pandemic, just is staggering.
Yeah.
The people who died. For me, it was kind of easy because I love being alone. But I think for a lot of people, that was very, very hard, and a huge learning experience. For me, the learning experience was creating community, but it had to be very intentional. Really had to, and I was teaching piano at that point, and I was amazed how many students, all the parents wanted them to keep on having lessons, even though they were through Zoom, because it was one of the few teaching situations where the kids were getting one-on-one attention. And I found that was really, really interesting. For me, learning more about electronics and about communication and all of that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. It's hard to believe, too, what the impact continues to have on us as we move forward. I think, again, when I compose, it's particularly now, it's really just about my worldview. And I can only hope that by sharing that worldview, I will, at the very least, resonate with with the listener. And not that I want them to get what I'm writing about. I don't want them to understand me. Actually, I want them just to resonate with themselves, understand themselves better, or maybe it's provocative in some sort of way, or open something up, or so I think when I grew up as a composer, there was this concern that the audience really understand the composer in a kind of, isn't the composer amazing? The composer is going to teach me something about something.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, the thrill is, it's a musical analogy. When you put the pedal down on the piano and you shout into the piano, the strings all vibrate and they emit sound. So in a way, that to me is a wonderful way of describing how I feel my relationship to music is I'm putting it out there to you. And what I'm interested in is that something in you resonates.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that a lot in the other musicians that I interact with. A lot of them happen to be just, their own bedroom composers, bedroom musicians and stuff, and they're pouring their heart into recording after recording after recording, and many of the ones that I get to have these conversations with, they're really small potatoes in the grand scheme of things, but they pour themselves into it, and out of that, I can feel the desire the desire for deeper connection and understanding, and for other people to experience that, and there's nothing more. And I'm an odd duck this way, but I've really slowly started shying away from just listening for the sake of listening, or entertaining myself, or passing the time, or whatever, but taking time to really, really listen and to really pour myself into it. There have been albums I've listened to from some of these musicians that, they move me to tears, and I'm like, how are you not so more widely distributed? But to me it points, it's like good metaphor is that I kind of come back to is it's like going on a hike through vast open fields, and you come across these little grove of flowers. They don't beg for the attention. They're there, and they're just being themselves. They're beautiful, fulfilling their life cycle, not asking for love and attention or fame, and the fact that I get to stop and admire it is optional.
Yeah,
which is
it's optional it's optional to you,
to the flower, and
it's optional to the flower, but it's a real moment of connection to something deeper.
Yes,
than you were the moment before, and the stopping. I think the whole idea of fame, or I like to think of it as being seen, but I think you're talking about it in a more constructive way, which is connection.
Yeah.
And, artists want to be seen, but they really want to connect. They really want to share something that's going on for them with others. And that can happen in big or small ways.
Yeah.
And And one is not in control of that. When you think of the idea that part of becoming famous is being in the right place at the right time, think how many geniuses were not in the right place at the right time and were lost. You could calculate that there are equally many as classical composers that just, I mean, Vivaldi's music wasn't played for 200 years. And then it was played in 1944 or something. So, what a fluke.
Yeah.
So I think artists really have to take their work with dedication and put all of themselves in it, but also take it lightly. You know the old saying, the angels can dance. The angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. And it's such a, it's true. They can do this miraculous things because they're not particularly invested in it.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's a hard one as an artist to handle. It's not something that's easy to do. So
especially when your ego or your persona or your image gets so wrapped up into it, and you're wrapped up into the idea of how you want to be perceived, as opposed to just being who you are authentically and pouring yourself into the music, into your creations, into your art, regardless of who sees it. And I tell you that this kind of explains for me the resurgence of not only vinyl but also cassette tapes. I see this a lot.
Oh no, not really.
Yes, I'm serious.
I love it.
In fact, there are ambient music labels and other genres as well that their whole shtick is all they do is release music on cassette tapes, and some also vinyl.
I love it.
And it's not because of the audio quality. I mean, but this idea of this physical connection, this physical, tangible medium that I have to the artist, that like some will go as far to create custom J cards. They'll they might write something, or they might color it or paint it or something, and it becomes a unique, tangible gift and a connection between the artists. And you might never listen to the cassette. You might continue to just listen to the album on streaming platforms, whatever. But the idea of that I've got a little piece, a little connection to this other human being, this other creative person like myself, and it's a nice touch point.
I love that. And I've always felt very fortunate that I grew up in a time where editing music used to be using a razor blade and taping the tape together. So that's how you would edit. I can't even imagine how people did that. The ability to hear that kind of sound and be able to cut out. And even in composing, so when I was younger and a student, we used to copy out our music on vellum, which is architectural paper. So the staff would be printed on one side and we'd write it out on the other side. You couldn't actually correct. You had to scrape off the India ink or cut a hole in the paper. And then you put it through an architectural machine on light-sensitive paper, and then through an ammonia bath. And then finally there were Xerox machines or photocopiers. Yeah. And I love that people don't even know what Xerox is now.
Yeah.
And I think my first piece, so I've been writing music since 76, but my first piece on a computer was 91. So it's just, I find it really fascinating how this has all changed. And I still write music with pencil and paper. just because I like to feel it. I love erasing.
Oh.
I just love erasing.
Yes.
So it's so tactile.
I am with you there. Like, within reach, I've got all my pencils and my ink and stuff, and my erasers. Like, I almost go nowhere without it. Like, I've basically almost given up social media almost entirely. I still use it to promote things, but I fill that time, that void, instead of doom scrolling. I fill it with drawing and fill it with,
Oh, I've never heard of doom scrolling. Ooh.
Yeah, it's like
a new piece. So
there you go.
Anyway, but I am so delighted to put out this album. The quartet and Natalie were just amazing to work with. It was so much fun to rehearse with them, and the first violinist always gave me pushback, like, what's that note? And I'll go, okay, so what are you thinking? I'm always interested in what, then they go, oh yeah, that's okay. But it was a real musical pleasure to work with them and, hear them interpret this music. And, and so I'm totally in love with them. They're a wonderful quartet. Natalie is an amazing pianist. And so I'm just so happy to put this out to the public. And not quite. The release is July 26th.
July 26th,
I think.
Yep. Coming out soon.
So, coming up soon, yeah.
It's, Tina, it was just such a wonderful album. As you mentioned, you can find it out July 26th. It's being issued out through New Focus Recordings, which you can find at newfocusrecordings.com. Tina's website is tinadavidson.com, and of course the Jasper Quartet, you can find them at jasperquartet.com. Jasper Quartet is made up of Freivogel?
Freivogel, right.
Freivogel, Karen Kim, both on violin, Andrew Gonzalez on viola, and Rachel Henderson Freivogel on cello, and pianist Natalie Zhu. Well, Tina, my heart just goes an extra few beats from just having these conversations. It's just just wonderful. We'll have to do it again. I think so. I think we'll have to make this a regular occurrence. So what I really appreciate about you and your compositions and your approach is just such deep authenticity. It's you can feel that thread of connection to the emotional spaces, to experience, to being on the bleeding edge of life and responding with joy, acceptance, love, kindness, and compassion for self, compassion towards others, and I just feel it in the music. And of course in your voice, in your tone, and just your stories. You have such wonderful stories. I still think back to the story you told about how your mother dropped you off, and you got to go watch these dancers perform, and
Merce Cunningham and John Cage.
I mean, hello. But I just really appreciate your time. I appreciate these conversations. And
thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. Thank you.
The pleasure is all mine.
Oh, no. The pleasure is mine.